The last time I stood on this porch, I promised myself I'd never come back. That was 6 years ago, right after I slammed the door on the only man who ever taught me how to mix iced tea just right. He wanted me to go to law school, follow the path he carved out like a good Southern daughter. I wanted to paint colors, not courtrooms. We shouted until our voices cracked, then I left. No goodbyes, just gravel kicking up behind my tires. Now here I was again, Charleston heat pressing on my shoulders like a weight I thought I'd escaped. The oak trees still framed the yard like sentries, heavy with moss and memory. The house looked exactly the same, weathered, stubborn, like it refused to forget. The screen door creaked, same as always, and that little tear in the mesh I made when I was 13 was still there. I had once carved my initials into the porch railing. Time and heat had faded them, but I could still feel the groove with my fingers. Inside, the air smelled of dust and leftover silence. I stepped through the hall, past family photos where I existed only as a teenager, like time had frozen without me. There was Trent in his graduation robe, Mom and Dad at their anniversary dinner, but no picture of me past prom night. Just the ghost of someone who left and didn't write. Aunt Josie barely glanced up when I entered the kitchen. "Claire," she said flatly, like the name tasted foreign in her mouth. I gave a nod. Cousin Elaine didn't even speak, just kept arranging forks like I might infect the silverware. I reached for a plate to help, but Aunt Josie snapped, "I've got it." Message received. I backed away. I could feel their eyes even when they weren't looking. Or maybe it was the lack of eyes, the deliberate turning away, the unspoken sentences dangling in the air. Outside, a neighbor leaned against her mailbox, arms crossed, mouth tight. Watching. Word had gotten around. The prodigal daughter returned. No husband, no kids, no law degree. Just me with my suitcase and my silence. I found myself drifting toward the back porch. It was my father's space, the place we'd sit on sticky summer evenings, a bowl of watermelon slices between us. He'd spit seeds into the yard with surprising accuracy and say, "It ain't summer till your elbows are sticky." I used to laugh. Now I just sat there alone, the wood warm beneath my palms, and remembered the way he'd squint into the horizon like it held answers. I was lost in that memory when the screen door creaked again. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. "So you showed up after all." Trent. His voice hadn't changed, low, guarded, always 2 words away from a storm. I looked over my shoulder and met his stare. Same square jaw, same eyes that never gave anything away. "I didn't come for a fight," I said quietly. "I just came to say goodbye." He stood there for a beat, arms folded. Then he stepped out beside me, but didn't sit. "You missed a lot," he muttered. "I know." Silence stretched between us like the humid air, thick, uncomfortable, pressing on the skin. He didn't say anything more, and I didn't ask him to. Back inside, I heard murmurs from the kitchen, the clinking of casserole dishes, the scrape of chairs. No one was waiting for me. No one wanted to see me. But I hadn't come for them. I came for him, for the man who raised me with discipline and sweet tea, who never quite understood me, and who I loved anyway. Tomorrow was the funeral. I'd be there, even if I had to stand alone at the back. I didn't return to reclaim anything. I came because he was my father, and you only get one chance to say goodbye. They didn't say hello. They didn't have to. Their stares said it all. The parking lot outside the funeral home was full, and yet I felt completely alone stepping out of my car. A wave of heat hit me, but it wasn't the sun, it was the way eyes turned and lingered. It reminded me of when I was 17, the only one in a room full of cousins who brought a sketchbook instead of a Bible. That same cold prickle ran up my neck now, only stronger. The inside of the funeral home was a strange blend of solemnity and hospitality. The scent of sandalwood incense floated in the air, mixing oddly with the smell of fried chicken and baked corn pudding. A long table stretched across the side wall, full of casseroles, deviled eggs, and pitchers of sweet tea. Southern comfort, wrapped in whispers and silence. I walked in, clutching my purse like armor, scanning for a place to sit. The front rows were already full. Trent sat in the second row beside Aunt Josie and Uncle Clyde. There were a few empty seats in the back, far from the casket. I hesitated, but no one waved me over. No one moved to make space. So I walked down the aisle alone and sat where the forgotten sit. From the corner of my eye, I saw Cousin Danielle nudge her sister and whisper something. They both glanced at me and smirked. "She really came," one of them muttered. "Bet she's here for what's left of the money," the other answered, not quietly enough. I stared straight ahead, jaw tight, heart thudding. I told myself I didn't care. But I did. Trent stood and adjusted his tie before walking to the front. The room quieted. He cleared his throat, then began. My father was a man of discipline, of tradition. He believed in hard work, honesty, and doing what's right, even when it was hard. He taught us to respect family, to serve the community, and to never, ever give up on what's worth fighting for. His voice cracked a little. Someone sniffled behind me. But as he went on, name after name floated through the room, neighbors, old friends, even family pets, yet not once did he say mine. Not even daughter. As if I wasn't part of his story. I sat frozen. My palms were damp, my breath shallow. My father's life was being rewritten in front of me, and I was being edited out. When Trent sat back down, Uncle Clyde stood up and walked to the podium. He wore his best Sunday suit, the same one he'd worn to every wedding and funeral for the past 20 years. His voice was slow and steady. Franklin believed in legacies, he said. He believed in raising up those who are worthy. And now we carry that forward. The ones who stayed. The ones who lived his values. His eyes flicked toward me for just a second, then moved on. The message was clear. I hadn't stayed. I wasn't worthy. As the ceremony ended, people rose and began milling around the food table. I walked over, pretending to be interested in a slice of peach cobbler. I hadn't tasted that dessert in years. Mom used to make it every summer. Ripe peaches, buttery crust, a hint of cinnamon. I took a bite, and for a moment, it was like being 7 again, barefoot in the kitchen, watching her hum over the stove. Then I looked around and realized I was surrounded by strangers wearing my last name. Aunt Josie slid beside me, holding a paper plate. "I hear someone's getting a painting," she said with a raised brow. "You know, the one above the fireplace? That thing's worth something now." I didn't answer. I didn't come back for art or antiques. But it seemed everyone else thought I had. Before I could escape to the hallway, a man in a gray suit tapped my shoulder. He held out a small envelope. "Claire Hayes." Yes. I blinked, unsure if I recognized him. "I'm with the firm handling Mr. Franklin Hayes's estate." He left behind a private video message. "For you only." My fingers closed around the envelope slowly. "Only me." He nodded. "It's not public." He made it clear this was just for you. "You can watch it when you're ready." My number's inside. The envelope was surprisingly heavy. I stared at it, heart thudding louder now than when the eulogies were read. Why would Dad leave me a video? After all this time, after cutting me out of every mention, why this? I slipped the envelope into my purse like it might vanish if I held it too long. I looked up and noticed Aunt Josie watching me from across the room, curiosity mixing with suspicion. Trent, meanwhile, was talking to Clyde, their heads close together, never once glancing my way. I stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, the heat no longer unbearable, just numb. I could still taste the peach on my tongue, but it didn't bring comfort. It only made me feel how far away Mom was and how foreign this family had become. A video. For me. My father, who hadn't called in 6 years, had recorded something with my name on it. I stood by my car, envelope clutched tight, wondering what he had said. Or what he hadn't. He stopped calling first. Then they all did. I stared into my coffee, the dark surface rippling slightly from the vibration of Yolanda's spoon clinking her saucer. The cafe hadn't changed a bit. Same creaky floorboards, same faded wallpaper with pale blue roses, same display of thick buttery cookies behind the glass counter. And yet everything felt different. Yolanda reached across the table and gently touched my wrist. "Claire, you okay?" I nodded, but it was a lie. "Just tired," I said. She didn't buy it, of course. Yolanda never had. We'd been best friends since sophomore year. She was the kind of girl who once punched a boy for making fun of my sketches. Now she wore gold hoop earrings and a deep red blouse, her curls still wild, her voice a little more grounded. But her eyes hadn't changed. "You don't have to pretend," she said softly. "Not here. Not with me." I let out a sigh, slow and shaky. "I sent him one of my paintings. For his birthday. It was 2 years ago. I framed it and everything. It was the first piece I was truly proud of. I thought, maybe if he saw what I'd become, he'd," my voice faltered. But I never heard back. Yolanda's face darkened. "You sent it to the house?" I nodded. And I left voicemails. I wrote him letters too. Nothing heavy. Just updates. A photo of my studio. A story about this boy in my art class who reminded me of Trent when we were kids. But I got silence. Radio silence. She stirred her coffee. "That was around the time he got sick, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Late-stage heart failure." But no one told me. I found out through a Facebook post. Someone tagged Trent at the hospital. Yolanda leaned back, arms crossed. "You know Trent was in charge of everything back then, right? Bills, doctor appointments, even the mail." I blinked. "The mail?" "Yup. I worked part-time at the post office when I moved back here. For about a year. Your dad's mail all got forwarded to Trent's P.O. box during that time." My stomach sank. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying it's possible," she said slowly, "that your father never saw any of what you sent." I stared at her, the edges of the room softening, my breath shallow. "You think Trent intercepted everything?" She nodded. "He had full control. And knowing him, I wouldn't be surprised." It was like a rug had been pulled out from under me. All this time, I'd carried the weight of being forgotten, ignored, unwanted. But what if he hadn't meant to push me away? What if I had been erased? I called once, after the gallery show in Atlanta, I whispered. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I left a message. Told him I sold all 5 pieces that night. I was so excited. Thought maybe he'd be proud. Yolanda's eyes were glassy. "Claire." I blinked hard and forced a smile. I guess I was trying to prove I wasn't a failure. Even from afar. "Claire," she said again, more firmly. "If there's a video from him, like that lawyer said, it might be the first time you've heard his real thoughts in years. His voice unfiltered. No one's speaking for him." I stared down at the butter cookie I'd barely touched. One bite took me back to Friday afternoons at her house, before either of us had bills or heartbreaks. Her mom always made these, still warm, crisp edges, a hint of almond. I can't leave yet, I said quietly. Even if no one else wants me here. Yolanda reached into her purse and slid a motel keycard across the table. You're not staying at the house again, are you? I shook my head. No. Good. It's room 12. End of the hall. Quiet and clean. I paid for 3 nights. You can extend if you need. I opened my mouth to argue, but she raised a hand. No pride speeches. Just take it. I'd do it 1,000 times over if it helps you find some closure. I closed my fingers around the keycard, the smooth plastic grounding me in this strange, aching present. Outside, the sun was lowering behind the row of brick buildings, casting long shadows onto the pavement. The porch swing of the cafe creaked in the breeze, and I could hear cicadas buzzing in the distance. Something in me shifted. The guilt I'd nursed for years, the hollow silence I thought my father had chosen, it cracked. Just slightly. Enough to let doubt in. I'm staying, I said aloud, almost to myself. Yolanda smiled. Good. I need to know what's in that video. And deep down, I needed to know if I'd been wrong about him. Or if the truth was even harder than silence. It wasn't just grief in that chapel. It was judgment. The moment I stepped through the wooden doors, 100 eyes flicked in my direction. Some glanced away as if they hadn't looked. Others held their gaze for just a second too long. A pause, a purse of the lips, a shared whisper between 2 aunts whose names I only barely remembered. The room was beautiful, I'll give them that. White lilies lined the front in tall vases, filling the air with that sharp, sweet scent of morning. A photo of Dad rested on an easel near the altar, one of his younger portraits, suited up, arms crossed, the confident smile of a man who always had a plan. Beside it, a table held a small selection of his favorite books, a framed certificate from the Chamber of Commerce, and 2 of his landscape paintings. One of them was mine, but no one knew that. Trent stood at the front, posture perfect, voice calm, suit ironed within an inch of its life. He was talking about our father like he'd been a saint, hardworking, community-minded, a pillar of family values. He listed off business accomplishments, donations, memories of backyard barbecues, and life lessons. Not once did he mention me. Not the daughter who used to sit on the floor of Dad's office, doodling in her sketch pad while he filed invoices. Not the teenager who begged for an old camera so she could learn to capture the town through her lens. Not the woman who left quietly after one too many arguments but mailed back every birthday card, even when they were never acknowledged. Clyde took over next. His voice was rough, deep like old gravel. Tradition, he said, isn't something you walk away from. It's a legacy you carry forward. Through your choices. Through your loyalty. Through the family name. His eyes swept the crowd, then lingered on me just long enough to make his point. I swallowed hard. Something burned at the back of my throat, not tears, but the heavy kind of shame you feel when someone hands you a story they made up about you and insists it's true. My hands trembled as I stood up. May I say a few words? A few people turned, surprised. Clyde didn't even look my way. Josie gave a tight-lipped smile that didn't touch her eyes. Trent stared at me like I'd spoken out of turn at someone else's wedding. No one answered. I hesitated. Then slowly, quietly, I walked toward the aisle and stopped near the back row. I began, voice shaky. I wanted to read something. A poem I wrote. He used to tell me stories about this old barn he played in as a boy, the one with the crooked door and the nest of swallows in the rafters. Thank you, Claire, Clyde interrupted. We're short on time. My words shriveled on my tongue. I stood there, frozen. No one objected. No one encouraged. Even the few who seemed sympathetic, like old Mrs. Ruby in the front row, only glanced at me with quiet pity. She reached out and gently touched my hand as I passed, her fingers dry and warm. But she didn't speak. I sat back down. The choir began a soft hymn, something about peace and heavenly rest, but the words barely registered. I couldn't take my eyes off the stained glass window behind the altar. The sunlight had shifted. The image of Christ looked almost alive now, the angle of the light casting long shadows across the floor. It hit me then, the way the light landed. It looked like the statue was watching me. Not accusing, not forgiving. Just watching. Then came the voice that cut through everything. "Excuse me." It was a man, tall, in a gray suit with a well-worn briefcase tucked under his arm. He stepped forward, clearing his throat. "My name is Reuben Knox. I was Mr. Franklin's attorney." His voice carried without effort, steady, professional. For his final request, he asked me to share something with you all today. A murmur rippled through the room. Trent stood, alarmed. This wasn't in the program. "I understand," Reuben said evenly. "But Mr. Franklin left explicit instructions. He recorded a personal message, intended to be played today, here at this service." I couldn't breathe. Reuben reached into his bag and pulled out a laptop. He set it on the lectern, plugged in a small speaker, and opened the lid. The screen lit up. Every eye turned toward it. Some people leaned forward. Others sat back in unease. Clyde looked like he'd bitten into something sour. Josie crossed her arms. Trent looked ready to object, but he didn't. And I just sat there, still and silent, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. His voice sounded older and softer than I remembered. The screen flickered once, then steadied. There he was, Dad, seated behind his old oak desk, the one with the chipped corner I used to rest my elbows on while begging for extra allowance. The background was familiar. The bookshelf lined with legal binders, the faded family photo on the far left, and the jar of licorice he always kept within reach. But his face was different. Not the stern father who used to argue with me over college majors. Not the silent man who never picked up the phone when I called. This man looked tired, gentler, as if the weight of time had finally softened the stone. He cleared his throat. "If you're watching this, then I've gone. And if Claire's there, I'm hoping she stayed." A gasp echoed somewhere behind me. Trent stiffened. Dad continued. "Claire, sweetheart, I know I wasn't easy. You were always different, and I didn't know what to do with different. I thought I was protecting you. Thought if I pushed hard enough, you'd fall in line. But you didn't. And now looking back, I see that what I called rebellion was really courage." My hands were trembling in my lap. I clenched them into fists and let my nails press into my palms. "I watched you grow into yourself from a distance. I saw your work. Your gallery opening in Asheville. The awards. I even bought one of your paintings under a different name. It's hanging in my study." A stunned chuckle escaped my lips, small and involuntary. No one turned. No one moved. "Trent," he said, his voice shifting, "you've been loyal to the family business. You did what you thought was right. But sometimes right and safe aren't the same thing." He sighed deeply. "Delaney Properties was built to serve this town, not just profit from it. Somewhere along the line, we forgot that. Claire hasn't. She remembers what matters. She sees people. She listens. She's not afraid to challenge what's been done just because it's always been done." Josie's eyes darted toward Trent, whose jaw was clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. "So," Dad said, with finality, "this is my decision. Effective immediately, Claire Franklin is the majority owner and sole executor of Delaney Properties. Someone audibly gasped. She'll have help, of course. Legal counsel, staff, advisors. But the future of this company and, in a way, this family rests with her. The screen went black. Silence stretched thin and sharp. Then Reuben Knox stepped forward. He didn't smile. He didn't hesitate. For the will, witnessed and notarized, and reinforced by this video, Claire Franklin is, as of today, the legal successor to Delaney Properties and its associated assets. You could hear the air shift. Feet shifted. A murmur built like a low wave at sea. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too stunned. My chest rose and fell in shallow breaths as I looked down at my lap. My hands were shaking so violently that I pressed them against my dress, grabbing the fabric tightly. The cotton wrinkled beneath my grip, but it gave me anything to hold onto. Josie looked ready to explode. Her lips were drawn so tight, they'd lost all color. Clyde rose abruptly and walked out of the chapel, his boots echoing down the aisle. He didn't say a word. Not a goodbye. Not even a grunt. All around me, faces turned. Not toward the front, not toward the altar, but toward me. There was no applause. No congratulations. Only eyes. Dozens of them. Cold, assessing, some tinged with disbelief. Others with something darker. Resentment. Trent remained seated, his hands folded in front of him. He stared straight ahead, unmoving. I couldn't tell if he was breathing. If I didn't know him better, I would have thought he'd turned to stone. And me? I sat there, feeling the weight of that video press down like a sudden storm. Everything had shifted. Just minutes ago, I was the forgotten daughter. The black sheep come home for a funeral. And now I was the center of it all. Not because they wanted me to be, but because he chose me. A part of me wanted to run, to scream, to reject it all out of spite. Another part, the quieter, older part, just sat still, absorbing, steadying. I wasn't ready, but maybe I didn't have to be. The house looked the same, but I wasn't the same girl who left it. The front door creaked open just like it used to. Same old hinges, same uneven welcome mat. The house hadn't changed, not the fading green shutters, not the cracked porch step, not even the smell of lemon polish and time. But as I stepped inside, dragging my suitcase behind me, I knew I wasn't the same. The living room greeted me like a still life painting left unfinished. Dust blanketed the bookshelves. The couch wore a new pattern of sun-bleached cushions, but everything else remained untouched, as if frozen since the last time I slammed the door behind me 6 years ago. I placed my keys on the hall table and stared at the family photo that hung above. We were all smiling. That was a lie. Even at 10, I knew how to smile when the camera flashed. I went upstairs and opened the door to my old room. The floral wallpaper had faded, and the air smelled like forgotten summers. My sketchbook still sat on the desk. I used to draw late into the night, headphones on, drowning out my father's footsteps. I wondered if he ever came in when I was gone. I wondered what he saw. There was a knock at the door downstairs. I hesitated. For a second, I thought no, impossible. It was Yolanda. She stood there holding a small woven basket filled with ripe peaches. Didn't think I'd let you rot in here alone, she said with that same crooked grin I loved in high school. I laughed softly. Still making peach cobbler on Thursdays? She held the basket out. Family traditions don't die easy in Charleston. We sat at the kitchen table, legs brushing like we were 17 again, and talked about everything and nothing. She asked how it felt, being back. I shrugged. Like walking into a story you never finished writing. Yolanda nodded, then her voice dropped low. I heard about the letter. I blinked. You mean the video? No, she said. There's talk about a second letter. Something your dad wrote. Not for the public. I hadn't told her. No one knew yet. After she left, I went back to my room to unpack. I lifted the old sketchbook and felt a hollow under it. I reached down and pulled out a wooden box. It was locked, but the latch was loose. Inside, I found 2 envelopes. One opened, one sealed. The opened one was dated 3 years ago. Claire, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe you've washed your hands of me, and I wouldn't blame you. I never understood your art, but I tried. I kept every flyer, every review I could find. I kept a photo of that painting of the blue chair. It reminded me of your mother. You got her eyes. Forgive me if you can. Or at least know that I never stopped watching, even from afar. Dad. I sat on the edge of the bed. The tears came slow, then suddenly fast. I clutched that letter like it was a life preserver. The first time I cried since he passed. I looked down. The second envelope had my name on it. The handwriting was familiar, rigid but careful. The flap was still sealed. I hesitated, then broke it open. Inside was another letter and 2 bank statements. Claire, there are things I should have told you sooner. About Trent. About the company. I found out he was using our assets to cover his debts, and I should have stopped it then. But I didn't. I was afraid of losing both my sons. You have the right to know. I named you successor not out of guilt, but because you were the only one who didn't ask for it. That's how I knew you were ready. There's a folder in my office drawer. Take it to Ruben. Dad. I stared at the numbers on the statements. Dates, amounts, transfers I didn't understand fully, but I would. I would figure it out. I folded the letters and placed them in a new envelope. Tucked it into the inside pocket of my jacket. I walked out onto the porch and stared up at the old oak tree, the one whose branches arched over the railing like an old friend's arms. Dad once told me that tree had been planted by my great-grandfather. Said it was meant to keep watch over us. Now, maybe it was watching me. My fingers brushed the peeling wood of the railing. I wasn't the same girl who left this house. And this house wasn't just a place anymore. It was a responsibility. It was a reckoning. And I was ready. The numbers didn't lie, but someone had. I stood at the top of the creaky basement stairs, inside the Delaney Properties building, a rusted ring of keys in my hand and the smell of old paper and mildew seeping through the door. The last time I'd been here, I was a teenager tagging along behind Dad, rolling my eyes while he talked about the importance of tracking every cent like it was gold. Today, I wasn't rolling my eyes. I was about to dig through his legacy. Reuben Knox had arranged access to the company's archival room, tucked beneath the old brick structure, like some secret chamber. You'll want to look at the quarterly ledgers from the past 5 years, he'd said, his voice calm but wary. Start with the Stonewell and Horizon projects. Your father had questions about them before he passed. The light flickered as I descended. Dust floated in the warm glow like tiny ghosts. Metal cabinets lined the concrete walls, each drawer labeled with faded masking tape. I took a breath and tugged open the one marked 2018 to 2019. An hour in, I began to see it. 2 entries, both labeled Horizon East. Same lot, same timeline. But one was recorded at a cost of $420,000. The other? Just $150,000. Both approved with Trent's initials TF. I blinked hard. Pulled out another binder. Another project. Same pattern. I pulled out my phone and snapped photos, then jotted quick notes in my spiral-bound pad. The room was hot and still, but I felt the cold realization spreading through me. "You look like someone who's just seen a ghost," a voice startled me. I turned. Manny, the company's current in-house accountant, stood at the door with a styrofoam cup of coffee and a cautious smile. "I didn't hear you come in," I said, straightening. "I figured you'd be down here sooner or later," he replied, setting the cup on a dusty table and pulling up a rolling chair. "Your dad asked me about some of this a while ago." Quietly. "Never followed up, though. Then he got sick." I held up a sheet. "Is this what I think it is?" Manny squinted. "Yeah, that project was listed twice. Same land, different cost centers." I flagged it back in the system, but Trent, well, he told me it was an internal error and not to worry. Only he had clearance to edit those files. Did Dad know? I think so. But I think he also didn't want to start a fire he couldn't put out. Ruben came in around noon, his coat draped over one arm and his brow already furrowed. "Please tell me this is just bad math," I said, handing him the evidence. He read in silence. "No, it's not. But we can't jump to conclusions. If Trent's involved in fraudulent transfers, this needs more than suspicion. We need proof, legal proof." I nodded, holding back the wave of nausea rising in my chest. "I want to build a file. Quietly. I want everything copied and secured." Ruben agreed. "We'll keep this between us for now. And Claire, be careful. This isn't just about numbers. If Trent's been moving money around, he won't want it exposed." That night, back at the old house, I cleared a space in Dad's study. I started printing files, making backups, storing documents in folders labeled personal. The walls were still lined with books about property law, land use, and business ethics. I ran my hand over one of the spines. Ethics and ownership. Protecting family legacy. It felt like a cruel joke. Later, while organizing paperwork, I remembered the line from Dad's letter. "There are things you should look for in the records." Things I couldn't say aloud. He'd known. Around midnight, I found a folder with the name Green Bay Holdings tucked behind old zoning documents. It was a shell company, one I hadn't seen listed anywhere else. The address traced back to a P.O. box in Georgia. But the money? It went directly to a private account. The name on the signature line? Trent Franklin. That was the moment I stopped feeling surprised and started feeling angry. I copied everything. Made 2 backups. Sent one to Ruben. I wasn't naive. If Josie or Clyde caught wind of what I'd uncovered, I'd be shut down or worse, dragged through legal hell. Then the email came. Simple. Plain text. From Josie's personal account. "Don't dig too deep, Claire. Some things are better left buried. For your sake." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, palms slick with sweat. They knew. But I wasn't the same girl who left this town 6 years ago. And I sure wasn't afraid of buried secrets anymore. Dad had said, "Don't let the truth stay buried in ledgers, because one day it'll be the only light guiding you." I was ready to follow that light. Rumors, as if on wings, flew from corner to corner in Charleston in the days after the funeral. I was no stranger to indifference, but this time there was something deeper, more insidious. It wasn't coming from one person, it was the whole town. I heard the first whisper while I was in line at Edna's, where I'd bought my mother a peach pie for her birthday the year she died. She didn't shed a tear at the funeral, someone said behind me. When I turned around, there were only averted eyes. No one called my name. No one said hello. At the weekend farmer's market, Yolanda pulled me toward the strawberry section. "Just walk," she whispered. "Don't look at them." But I did. I saw Mr. Clyde standing at the bread counter, shaking his head slightly and turning away. I saw the woman who had praised my paintings, now pulling her son away as if I were a warning. A local newspaper, the Charleston Lantern, published an unsigned article, "Unexpected Heir, Manipulated Will?" In it, sources close to me said I had shown up without reason, hadn't been near my father in his final years, and may have pressured Franklin into making the video. Yolanda was angrier than I was. "You can't let them keep talking like that. You have to respond." I sipped my iced tea, still holding the basket of cherry tomatoes. What good does responding do? They've chosen to believe what they want. She took my hand, her eyes full of pity. "How much longer are you going to put up with it, Claire?" That afternoon, I stopped by the flower shop on the corner, the one that used to wrap peonies for my mother's birthday. The owner, Alma, had asked me where I studied art and had taped a postcard of my exhibition to the wall. This time, she just looked at me for a moment and then quietly walked away. I left the peonies on the counter, but no one came forward to take the money. That evening, Clyde knocked on the door. I opened it, surprised that he was the first relative to visit since the funeral. "You're still here." "Of course." He looked around the living room, where pictures of my father and me hung tilted on the wall. Living in this town, sometimes it takes more than a title. It takes trust. I sat down, offered him tea. Trust. I feel like it's something you can't get back when you don't want to give it. He didn't say anything. Then, before leaving, he said softly, "Your father chose you for a reason. But the rest, you have to prove it to yourself." After that, I walked out onto the back porch, where the oak tree stood as still as it had for decades. I sat there for a long time, listening to the wind blowing through the leaves, remembering the evenings we spent peeling watermelons and talking about school. I couldn't let their words stifle that memory. I couldn't let this article, this look, this silence rewrite me. The next morning, I walked into town, to the community center, scheduled a meeting, open to anyone who wanted to hear the truth, not through hearsay, not through someone else's mouth. Yolanda was surprised when I told her. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "If they want to know who I am, I'll tell them." In my backyard, right where my dad grew tomatoes and my mom hung Christmas lights. She smiled softly, then squeezed my hand. "So we start preparing. And hopefully, they'll come." I didn't expect a crowd, but they came, chairs scraping, lips pursed, arms folded. Some faces I hadn't seen since high school. Others were strangers, drawn in by curiosity more than concern. The sun was beginning its slow descent behind the oak trees, casting long shadows across the backyard I used to run barefoot in. Yolanda helped me set up earlier that day. We arranged rows of mismatched chairs and laid out pitchers of lemonade, a tray of cornbread muffins, and a few folding fans in case the heat clung too tightly. I'd even pulled out an old portable speaker to play some soft gospel music in the background, something Daddy used to hum along with on Sunday mornings. When I stepped out with my notes trembling slightly in hand, the murmurs stopped. All eyes turned to me, not warmly, not cruelly, just expectantly, like folks waiting to hear the final act of a play they didn't buy tickets for. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I know there are questions. I know some of you think I don't belong here." Beneath a wide-brimmed straw hat, Mrs. Edna raised her chin. "Do you?" she asked plainly. "Do you truly believe you're the rightful one to carry on your father's legacy?" I took a breath. I didn't come back expecting anyone's blessing. Truth is, I never thought I'd set foot here again. But Daddy left a message. For me. For everyone. And like it or not, he made a choice. Clyde, seated beside Edna, folded his arms across his chest. If you loved this place, if you respected what it stood for, why'd you walk away all them years ago? I met his gaze, not flinching, because I was told I wasn't enough. Because everything I believed in my art, my way of seeing the world, was seen as weakness. I left because staying meant breaking into someone I wasn't. And still, I tried to stay connected. I wrote. I called. I sent my paintings. I waited. But no one called back. Someone coughed in the back. A folding chair squeaked. Then Josie's voice sliced through the stillness like a blade. Or maybe you waited until your father was too old to fight you. Maybe you watched from a distance, then swooped in when it was convenient. I turned toward her slowly. I won't stand here and argue motives, but I will say this, I didn't come back for a company. I came because he asked me to, and because I wanted one last chance to understand him. There was a beat of silence, heavy and awkward. Then Clyde spoke again, softer this time. Understanding's hard when you ain't been around. I nodded. I know. But I'm here now. And I'm willing to listen. To earn back whatever trust one can. I looked around the crowd. Some averted their eyes. Others looked thoughtful, maybe even conflicted. But before anyone else could speak, a figure emerged from the side gate. He was older, maybe late 60s, wearing a worn blazer and carrying a manila envelope. His shoes were dusty and his gait uneven, but his eyes locked onto mine with unsettling certainty. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, voice deep but raspy. My name's Jacob Lawton. I was a friend of Franklin's, of your father's. He gave me something before he passed. Told me to hold on to it until the time felt right. He held up the envelope. The crowd murmured again. My heart pounded. What is it? I asked, stepping forward. A letter, he said. Signed and dated. Addressed to you. Franklin wanted you to know a few things before the rest of them found out. All around me, the backyard felt tighter, like the very air had drawn into here. I took the envelope from him with both hands, suddenly aware of how silent the space had become. A squirrel darted across the fence. The old ceiling fan on the porch groaned softly, the same one that hummed through summer barbecues and long holiday evenings. I turned to the crowd, letter in hand, trying to find words again. But I didn't need to. The moment had spoken for itself. And whatever that letter held, I knew my life in Charleston was about to shift again. The paper smelled like old books and lemon oil, just like his study. I sat alone in my father's old study, the soft yellow light illuminating the dusty bookshelves. Everything was still almost intact. The fountain pen he used, the dried ink bottle, the grandfather clock that still ticked slowly in the corner. The space seemed frozen in time, carrying the scent of dark wood, old books, and the gentle lemon scent my mother used to clean the cupboards every Sunday. The letter was handwritten on ivory-colored embossed paper. My father's handwriting was shaky, but it still retained its characteristic firmness, just like him. I took a deep breath before I began to read. Claire, if you're reading this, I'm probably not here to say all the things I should have said a long time ago. My heart sank, and my hand tightened on the edge of the paper. His words came out in a whisper, slow and sincere. I saw your painting in an exhibition in Asheville 3 years ago. It was unsigned, but I knew only you could see the world through that lens. I stood in front of it for a long time, and then I left without asking who had done it. That day, I saw your vision beyond the confines of Charleston and of myself. I raised my head, tears welling in my eyes, but not falling. He saw. He recognized. There are mistakes I carry with me all my life. One of them was letting Clyde and Trent influence our relationship. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. And I let you go without keeping you. Not because I didn't love you, but because I was afraid your differences would change things too quickly. I was wrong. I felt like he was sitting right behind me, his voice as low and sad as the days he read the morning paper. In the safe in my office, you will find my original draft of a project I have been working on for the past 10 years. Trent would never agree to it. It would not bring in quick profits. But I believe that if anyone can get it where it needs to go, it is you. I looked over at the desk, where there was now only a small framed photo of my father and me on my high school graduation day. He was in a suit, I was in a blue gown, and we were both smiling, a rare smile that I had almost forgotten. I set up a trust fund years ago, but Trent hid it from you. The copyright is still mine, and now it is yours. In this enclosed letter, Mr. Baines will give you the key. Use it wisely. I put the letter down as Mr. Baines, the man who had delivered the letter the day before, walked in. Without a word, he handed me a small key, tied with an old leather cord. My hands shook as I took it. I promise him, Mr. Baines said softly, I'll give it to your daughter. I nodded, speechless. Yolanda arrived later, carrying peach pies. She sat next to me, reading the letter as if she had lost a father herself. When she got to the part about Trent and the hidden funds, she squeezed my hand. You know what you have to do, don't you? I didn't answer right away. I stood up, walked over to the framed photo of my father and me, and gently laid the letter down beside it. My fingers touched the corner of the frame as if seeking silent approval. If Trent is using my name to get around the law, I whispered, it's time I let it all out. Outside, a light rain was falling. The drops tapped against the tin roof like a warning drum. I stood in the middle of that room, both the late-loved daughter and the heiress facing the truth. And for the first time, I felt, this is not just my father's house. This is mine too. And I am ready. This wasn't just a board meeting. It felt like a trial. I stood before the frosted glass door of the main conference room at Delaney Properties and took a deep breath. In the reflection, I saw myself no longer the young girl who left home with 2 suitcases and a dream of painting. Now I was the chosen one, the one carrying a legacy and a war that had no end in sight. Inside, the air was heavy with lead. Dark brown leather chairs were arranged around a long oak table, a pale yellow light shining on its bare surface. 3 board members were seated, each with a file in front of him. Reuben Knox sat to my right, stoic as ever, while Manny, the internal accountant, held a stack of papers, his eyes downcast. I saw a light sheen of sweat on his forehead. I'll be brief, I began, my voice calmer than I expected. This is a handwritten plan by my father, Franklin Delaney. It describes a community project he has been working on for over 10 years. I held out the draft. Manny stepped forward, exchanging glances with the council before confirming. I can confirm that this is Franklin's handwriting. It was kept in his private safe. There are no signs of any later changes or interference. I continued, handing over another stack of documents, and here are last year's financial statements, in which there are 2 investments with the same project code, but a difference of nearly $300,000. One is listed as operating costs, the other is of unknown destination. A council member, Marlene, frowned. Did Trent approve both of these? Manny swallowed. Yes, all of the disbursements during that period were approved by Trent. The room fell silent for a long moment, then Reuben gently placed his hands on the table. We're not here to threaten, but if the board doesn't consider Claire's legal inheritance, which is clearly stated in the video will and Franklin's handwritten letter, then we'll be forced to open legal proceedings. And then it won't be an internal matter anymore. The door swung open. Trent walked in. The lights illuminated his sharp black suit. He still had the same confident, somewhat arrogant demeanor. "What a show," Trent said, his voice barely concealing the sarcasm. "You don't know anything about management. You've never been to a meeting. You're a runaway who went to paint somewhere." I looked straight at him. "And still my father's most trusted person, even though he's gone." I spoke slowly, but loudly enough to echo in the room. One of the board members nodded slightly. Trent opened his mouth to say something, but no sound came. Instead, it was Marlene. "Looks like we've heard enough." The man sitting next to her, Garrett, folded his folder. "Vote here." I turned to look at the wall behind them, where an old photo hung, my father, as a young man, standing next to a little brown-haired girl me on the day the first branch opened. I remembered him lifting me up so I could reach the Delaney nameplate hanging high above my head. The photo was more than a memory. Now it was a witness to a loop, where the child had returned, ready to take charge. Hands raised. Futures changed. The late afternoon light slanted through the glass doors, stretching my shadows across the conference room floor. We had been sitting here for hours, discussing, arguing, and now all that was left was silence. A silence not of confusion, but of waiting. Of judgment. I looked up at the long table where the 5 voters sat. Each had a different expression. Marlene was staring at the file. Garrett had his arms resting on the table, and Trent did not hide the tension growing in his chest. "I would like to proceed to a vote," Ruben said, his calm voice resonating evenly through the room. "Whoever agrees to approve the appointment of Claire Delaney as managing partner of Delaney Properties, in accordance with the terms of the will and the evidence presented, please raise your hand." I didn't breathe. 1 hand, Marlene. 2 hands, Garrett. And then, Mr. Lucas's hand, the silent one throughout the meeting, slowly rose. 3 votes. I loosened my fists in my lap. It felt like an invisible wave had just swept through the room, pushing back months of rejection, of being marginalized, of being judged inadequate. Ruben nodded. 3 yes. The decision is made. Trent shot up, his chair pushing back against the wall. "You'll regret it." He looked at each of them, his eyes burning with anger. "She doesn't know anything about this company, about how my father runs it. She'll destroy everything he's built." I didn't answer. There was no need. Clyde sat in the far corner of the room, where the light was fading. He hadn't said anything until now, but when Trent finished, he raised his head. "Maybe it's for the best," he said slowly, clearly, each word heavy with time. Trent paused, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Clyde, who had always supported him, agreed with me silently. I felt my chest tighten, not because of pain, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. Ruben handed me a file. "You need to sign this to confirm your appointment." I stepped up to the conference table. The pen in my hand no longer trembled. I had practiced writing thousands of times in my life, brush strokes on canvas, words in diaries to my father, rejected exhibition applications. But never before had a signature meant so much. Claire Delaney. I wrote my name firmly. The sound of the pen hitting the paper was like an exclamation point, like a declaration to the world. I was here without anyone's recognition. I left the conference room. My hands were still stained with ink, my head still reeling from so many unnamed emotions. The hallway was empty. The sound of my heels hitting the floor echoed like a heartbeat calming down. As I reached the door, I saw Edna. She was standing there, leaning lightly against the doorframe, her thin silver hair falling over her forehead, her hands clasped together. She didn't speak right away, just looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. "You can start again," she said, her voice hoarse but warm. I almost cried, but then I just nodded. On the door of the room I had just left, someone had quickly affixed a new bronze plaque. Claire Delaney, managing partner. I stood there looking at it for a few seconds. Then I walked away, because I knew my journey didn't end here. It had just begun. There were things up there that hadn't seen light in decades, just like parts of me. The attic door let out a long groan as I pulled it open, as if it, too, resented being disturbed after all these years. Dust shimmered in the slanting autumn light pouring through the cracks in the roof. The wooden ladder creaked under my steps, and for a moment, I felt like a child again, small, hesitant, peeking into a place I was told never to explore alone. But this time, I wasn't alone. "You sure about this?" Yolanda called up from the hallway, holding a flashlight and sneezing through the dust. "Not even a little," I said, smiling weakly. We climbed into the attic together. The air was thick with age-old wood, mothballs, something like forgotten perfume. Piled boxes leaned like tired shoulders against the beams. Some were labeled, others simply marked with a faded F. For Franklin. For father. I bent down to open the nearest one and paused. It was my handwriting. The label read, "Return to sender?" Inside lay a painting. Mine. One I painted during college of the marshes near Charleston at dusk and mailed home during a brief moment of hope. He never wrote back. But here it was, carefully wrapped, edges intact, with a note tucked inside the frame. I didn't know how to say it, but this made me proud. I couldn't breathe for a second. The painting had lived here all these years, not discarded, not forgotten. Kept. Yolanda sat on a stack of boxes, watching me with glassy eyes. "You okay?" I nodded. "No." "Yes." "I don't know." We kept searching. More boxes. Old tax documents, Polaroids, reels of home video. And then I found it, a small cassette tape, labeled only with my name. A cassette. I held it like it was a newborn bird, fragile and full of meaning. There was a dusty player nearby, miraculously still plugged in. With trembling fingers, I inserted the tape and pressed play. Static. Then, his voice. "If you've found this, Claire, it means you've come back. And I hope that means you've forgiven me. But if not, maybe this will help." Yolanda turned her face away and wiped her cheek. I sat frozen. I didn't know how to raise an artist. I knew how to raise a worker, a provider. I thought protecting the family meant steering it hard. But watching your mother love you, that was the only time I questioned myself. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. "You don't have to live like me. Just live like you." Tears slid down my cheeks without me realizing. Not loud tears. Not sobbing. Just quiet release, like sap from a wound finally warmed by spring. Yolanda covered her mouth, then let out a choked laugh. "I didn't know he loved you so much. I wish you'd heard this sooner." "So do I whispered, still staring at the cassette player. But maybe I wasn't ready. The attic felt smaller now, fuller. Less of a graveyard and more of a memory chest. In the corner, I found a box labeled in Mom's handwriting. Inside, a folded sweater. Faded green wool, the kind that always smelled like cinnamon and cedar. My mother knitted it for me the winter before she died. I pressed it to my face, and for a second, It was like I was 10 years old again, hiding in her lap after a nightmare. She used to hum when she knit, I said. Yolanda nodded. She had the softest voice. I wrapped the sweater around my shoulders and stood. There was nothing in that attic I feared anymore. Not the ghosts. Not the silence. I walked to the small attic window and wiped the grime with my sleeve. The view of the yard below came into focus slowly, like an old photo developing in a dark room. And there he was, Trent, standing at the gate, not moving toward the house, not turning away, just there, still as a statue, caught between the past and whatever came next. My hands gripped the window frame. Yolanda came up beside me and followed my gaze. You want me to go talk to him? No, I said. Not yet. I didn't know what he wanted. I didn't know if he would shout, apologize, or say nothing at all. But for the first time in years, I felt steady enough to face him whenever he was ready. Behind me, the attic settled with a creak, as if acknowledging something long locked away had finally shifted. We stood on opposite sides of the fence, but maybe for the first time, we both wanted the same thing. The gate creaked gently between us, dry leaves curling around our feet like memories we hadn't spoken of. The last warmth of the sun touched the top of Trent's shoulders, casting his face in partial shadow. He looked older, tired, but somehow more open than I remembered. You didn't have to come, I said, breaking the silence. I know, he replied, voice quiet. But I couldn't keep pretending it didn't matter. I nodded, fingers brushing the wood of the fence, the same one we'd once climbed over as kids to sneak into the neighbor's orchard. I don't hate you, he said after a long pause. I'm just jealous. You were always braver than me. Always knew what you wanted. That stung more than I expected. Not the jealousy, the fact that he'd been carrying it like a weight all these years. I used to wish I had been born a son, I admitted. Just so Dad might have tried to understand me. Trent gave a short, humorless laugh. He didn't understand me either. He just assumed I was the one who should carry everything. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The leaves rustled gently, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked twice, then went silent. The quiet felt sacred, like the space between two fragile truths finally shared. I'm not proud of what I did, Trent said finally. Hiding the letters. Blocking your calls. It was easier to believe you'd given up on us than admit I was pushing you out. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, my brother, no longer the villain in my head, just another wounded child who grew up wrong. I found something you should have, I said, pulling a worn photo from my pocket. It was our father, younger, sitting between us on a faded picnic blanket, his arms around us both. Trent took it, eyes scanning the faces, his own mouth curving in a faint, wistful smile. He wasn't good at saying it, was he? No. But I think he tried, in his own way. Trent looked at me again, not with resentment this time, but something softer, perhaps regret, perhaps relief. I'm not asking for anything, Claire. I just wanted you to know. I don't want to fight anymore. I nodded. Neither do I. He gave a slow nod in return, pocketing the photo. Then, without another word, he turned and walked down the path, shoulders a little straighter, steps a little lighter. As he disappeared around the bend, I whispered to myself, maybe that's enough. The wind kicked up again, sending a swirl of leaves through the gate. I stepped back into the yard, the house behind me still and waiting. Inside, on the mantel, the photo of that same picnic rested beside a letter from my father. A reminder that even broken things could be mended, if not fully, then at least enough to let the light in. I closed the gate behind me, not as a barrier this time, but as a beginning. The sun hadn't yet dipped beyond the oaks when Yolanda finished placing the last stack of paper napkins on the long table out front. Lemonade pitchers glistened under the amber light, condensation forming beads like soft pearls down their sides. Plates of cornbread, sweet potato casserole, and brisket lined the table beside bowls of pickles and deviled eggs. Someone, probably Mr. Herbert, had already lit the citronella candles, their scent curling into the warm, late autumn air. Inside the house, I had turned on every light, even the small lamp in the hallway that used to flicker during storms. Jazz hummed low from a speaker on the mantel, Billie Holiday, I think, and my mother's framed embroidery hung next to my father's favorite landscape painting, the view from the church hill on a clear day. I hadn't expected many to come. Yet just as the sky turned from gold to a quiet lavender, they started arriving. Slowly, carefully, as if unsure whether the invitation was real or if the front gate would snap shut behind them. Clyde came first, carrying a rusted old barbecue drum Franklin, used to man on July 4ths. He didn't say much, just nodded at me and began setting it up near the garage, rubbing his hand along the rim like it was a long-lost friend. Mrs. Edna brought a peach pie. Same recipe your mama used, she whispered, placing it down like it was a family heirloom. Her eyes were soft, but her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the edges of the foil. Children ran through the yard, their laughter unburdened by decades of silence. Yolanda moved easily among the crowd, passing out plates and catching up with old friends. Mr. Herbert leaned on the porch rail, sipping sweet tea and telling anyone who would listen about how he once beat Franklin at checkers, just once and never again. I watched it all, standing in the doorway. I'd spent so much time afraid of these people, of what they might say or what they might withhold. But today, they weren't ghosts from the past. They were neighbors, family of a kind. Inside, I'd hung my paintings along the main hallway, soft watercolors of familiar places, the oak by the river, the red clapboard barn, a table set for two in afternoon light. Next to them, I tacked up old black and white photos of my parents. My mother laughing with a wooden spoon in her hand. My father bent over a jigsaw puzzle, glasses low on his nose. They looked right at home. As the sun sank further, painting the horizon in burnt oranges and plum purples, a small girl tugged at my sleeve. Her hair was done up in two puffy ponytails, and her eyes were wide with curiosity. Are you the lady who draws pretty houses? I knelt beside her. Sometimes, I said. Would you like to try? She nodded, and I led her to the back patio where crayons and paper waited on a folding table. A few more kids joined, and soon the table buzzed with excitement. As they drew, I remembered how it felt, being seen for what you could make, not what people expected you to be. I hadn't come back to be loved. I came back to preserve what my father believed in. But somehow, in honoring him, I had found pieces of myself he always saw, maybe even before I did. As I stood in the middle of the yard, watching familiar faces laughing and eating beneath the soft porch lights, something inside me clicked into place. I remembered a phrase Franklin used to say when I was little, whenever we lit the fireplace during winter storms. You're the firekeeper now. And I understood. I wasn't just the daughter who came back. I was the one who stayed. The one who opened the door and kept the fire burning, not for myself, but for all of us. When the evening finally settled into a hush, and the guests began to leave in twos and threes, I walked back inside. The house smelled of cinnamon, barbecue smoke, and old wood polish. I picked up the thank you cards Yolanda had helped me write and placed them by the door. In mine, I added one last sentence. Sometimes a home is more than just a place to live. It's a place to return to. As I turned off the lights, the glass door caught the last light of sunset, its glow reflecting my silhouette alongside the houses. For the first time, we looked whole. The morning light seeps in through the lace curtains of what used to be my father's office, now my studio. The old desk is still there, worn and solid, but it no longer holds ledgers or real estate documents. Instead, it cradles paintbrushes, tubes of acrylic, and a tin of charcoal pencils. On the wall behind it hangs the last painting I completed, a portrait of my father, sitting quietly on the porch, his eyes focused on something I'll never quite know. Each morning, I rise before the sun fully crests the treetops. I make a batch of sweet iced tea, exactly the way he liked it, strong, steeped long, with a touch of lemon. Sometimes I sit on the same porch he used to sit on, letting the wood creak beneath me, listening to the wind rustle through the oak leaves like it's saying something only I can understand. The town hasn't changed much. Clyde still walks his dog past the house, though he gives a half nod now instead of silence. Yolanda drops off extra peaches when the market has a good harvest. I turned the dining room into a small community space. Every Saturday morning, kids from the neighborhood come in for art class. They track in dirt and laughter, and I don't stop them. We use old magazines, crayons, whatever they can get their hands on. I teach them not just how to draw, but how to see. Delaney Properties isn't what it was when Dad and Trent ran it. After the dust settled, I worked with Ruben and a few other members of the board to restructure. We pulled out of risky developments. Now we invest in local conservation and community support projects, revitalizing parks, renovating libraries, building ramps where there used to be stairs. Our new motto is stenciled on the office door: do small things, but be kind. Sometimes I wonder what my father would say about all this. The man who once said I was wasting time with brushes had, in the end, handed me everything. Not because I conformed, but because I didn't. Last week, I sat down at that old desk and pulled out a piece of stationery thick, ivory-colored, like the kind he used for his personal letters. I wrote a note to the version of myself from 6 years ago, the girl who drove away with anger in her heart and paint-stained fingers clenched around the wheel. It simply said, "Just come back. I'll be fine." And I have been. Today, after tidying the house, I stood again at the studio window. Outside, the leaves had just begun to turn, the edges kissed with gold. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the yard where kids had once played, where secrets were kept, and where, somehow, healing had begun. I whispered, "Thanks, Dad." Not for the inheritance, or the title, or the house, but for leaving me space to return to myself, to family, to this town I once thought too small to hold me. Sometimes we look for answers in all the wrong places, across oceans, in skyscrapers, in the eyes of people who will never understand us. But sometimes, all it takes is one person who believes in you, flawed as you are, to remind you that you were never really lost. In life, there are things that can't be found when they're lost: time, words left unsaid, love left unspoken. But sometimes, just one person who believes in you is enough to start all over again. I'm someone who's quietly followed this story from the very beginning, and now that it's come to a close, I'd like to share a few thoughts from the heart. This was never just a story about a house, or a will, or a company. It was about a daughter trying to find her way back, to love, to forgiveness, and most importantly, to herself. What moved me most wasn't the twist in the inheritance, but the quiet moments, a porch remembered, a letter kept, a voice that waited years to be heard. In life, sometimes we walk away thinking we'll never return. but time has a way of softening edges. And when someone believes in us, just one person, it can change everything. And you, have you ever felt like a stranger in your own family? Have you ever left, only to wonder if it's too late to go back? If this story reminded you of something, an old memory, a conversation never had, feel free to leave a comment. Just type number 1 if it touched your heart, or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy warm, thoughtful stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's more coming, and I'd be honored if you stayed. Thank you for listening and for walking with us through all 16 chapters. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other.